Good morning and happy Tuesday. Today is day 37 and we are in Luke chapter 23, verses 1 through 25. And our sweet treat today is that Jesus is selfless. Now, yesterday we ended chapter 22 with the Sanhedrin Council hearing Jesus' testimony that he is, in fact, the Son of God. Today in chapter 23, he's brought before Pilate. Now, Pilate was the Roman governor over Judea, and since the Romans didn't give the Jews authority to execute someone without their permission, the Jewish leaders had to bring Jesus to him. Pilate had a reputation for being ruthless and cruel, so they fully expected Pilate's cooperation in killing Jesus. When the priests stood before Pilate, they knew he wouldn't care one bit about Jesus' claim to being king of the Jews. Pilate was not concerned with any religious matters pertaining to them. So when they stood before him, they took a different approach, saying, "We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ, a king." So Pilate asks him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus looked anything but threatening to Pilate in this moment, standing there all beaten and bloodied and bruised. He didn't stand tall and strong and proud, challenging Pilate. He stood meek and quiet, only speaking when he was asked to. Pilate just isn't feeling threatened by Jesus, and he sees through the scheme of the Jewish priests. So he simply says that he finds no fault in Jesus. The crowd of religious leaders is not happy to hear this, and they become more fierce. Luke says in their insistence that Jesus be executed. They claim that Jesus is a revolutionary and a leader of insurrection, meaning that he was getting people all riled up and stirred up against them. Insurrection was a crime, and the Jewish leaders pleaded that Jesus should be charged. Pilate really doesn't want to deal with any of this, so as soon as he learns that Jesus is from Galilee, he realizes this is King Herod's territory, and so he ships Jesus off to stand before Herod, who also happened to be in Jerusalem at the same time for Passover. Luke tells us that when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad. He'd been wanting to meet Jesus for a very long time, and he was finally able to. This was his chance. He was really hoping to see Jesus perform this great miracle. He wanted him to prove himself, but Jesus was not about to put on a show for Herod. That's simply not the way the King of Kings works. So Herod continues to question Jesus, but Jesus has nothing to say to him. Even though when the crowd is shouting out accusations, Jesus is saying nothing. Once again, Jesus chooses not to return hatred with hatred. Herod absolutely despises Jesus for this, and so with his men of war, he mocks Jesus and he treats him with great contempt. Luke says it was the shared frustration in Jesus that actually brought Herod and Pilate together, and they became friends that day for the first time. When Herod was done with Jesus, he sent him back to Pilate. And Pilate tells the crowd for the third time that he still finds no fault with Jesus, but he agrees to go ahead and punish him and then release him, thinking that will appease the crowd. And punishing was no small thing. It involved the brutal scourging of flesh with these leather whips that had metal tips on the end. So while Pilate found Jesus innocent, he was still very willing to brutally wound Jesus for the crowd's pleasure. It was necessary for Pilate to release one criminal for the feast, so he thought the crowd would willingly take Jesus. He knew the Jewish priests would be angry, but he thought the general public would celebrate his release. To his surprise, the crowd did not like this idea, and they instead asked for the release of a man named Barabbas, who had been guilty of insurrection and murder. In fact, they began shouting, "Crucify him, crucify him." They wanted Jesus dead. Not wanting a riot on his hands, Pilate releases Barabbas and sends Jesus to his death. Our sweet treat today is that Jesus is selfless. At any point, Jesus could have said enough. He could have healed himself. He could have fought his attackers. He could have performed miracles that would have created so much fear in them that they would have all ran away. But Jesus knows what his Father's will is, and he's ready to lay his life down for us. I hope you have a great day today, thinking about that sacrificial, selfless love of Jesus. He loves you as much today as he did that day, and he would do it all over again. That's how much he loves you. I'll see you tomorrow.